Hidden deep in the cold arms of the Atlantic, the Baltic Sea, like a gateway to a world full of unresolved mysteries. Spanning an enormous area of over 149,000 square miles, this vast brackish body of water is not only where land and sea meet, but also a place haunted by thrilling stories and chilling tragedies. Among those, a journey that never reached its destination, a ferry weighing over 15,000 tons, swallowed by the sea. Nearly 1,000 people perished. More than 3 decades have passed, but a series of new conspiracies and shocking theories continue to surface. What truly happened? Why did this disaster unfold the way it did? What secrets still lie beneath the waves? Join us as we uncover one of the worst maritime disasters in modern history. The sinking of the MS Estonia. September 27, 1994, Tallinn, the capital of Estonia. Starting from 4 p.m., passengers began arriving, preparing for a 14-hour voyage from Tallinn to Stockholm, Sweden. The MS Estonia was a passenger and car ferry built in 1980 by West Germany. It was originally named Viking Sally and operated on routes between Finland and Sweden. Over the years, the ship was managed by several different companies. Then in January 1993, it was sold to Nordstrom and Thulin, a Swedish shipping company. From that point on, the ferry operated primarily on the Tallinn-Stockholm route. It was renamed Estonia, representing the small northern European country that had just regained independence from the Soviet Union. Although Swedish companies held major ownership, the ferry remained a proud symbol of Estonian sovereignty. The MS Estonia had 11 decks and a total length of 157 meters. Passenger cabins were located on decks 1, 4, 6, while the crew stayed on decks 7 and 8. Deck 2 was reserved for vehicles and cargo. It was the largest passenger ferry in Estonia at the time, equipped with a wide range of amenities: a sauna, swimming pool, conference rooms, restaurants, bars, snack counters, a children's playroom, and even a cinema. The ship was powered by 4 diesel engines, with a total output of 17,625 horsepower, capable of reaching speeds up to 39.1 kilometers per hour. With a gross tonnage of over 15,000 tons, Estonia could carry more than 2,000 people, including 1,190 beds and 460 vehicles. On this voyage, the ferry was carrying 989 people, 0.803 passengers, 0.186 crew members. That was only about half of its maximum capacity. Most passengers were Swedish and Estonian, though others came from Russia, Finland, Norway, Germany, and Denmark. The ship's captain was Andresen, a veteran with 25 years of experience at sea. Trained under the Soviet Union's maritime system, he had captained the Estonia since the first day it entered service. That evening, a slight issue loading vehicles delayed the departure. The ferry eventually left the dock 15 minutes late, receiving its departure order at 7:15 p.m. Its scheduled journey would pass through the Baltic Sea, with arrival in Stockholm expected at 9 a.m. the next day. Although storm warnings had been issued, conditions were still deemed manageable. The ship, fully loaded, leaned slightly to the starboard side due to uneven cargo distribution, but it moved steadily at speeds between 20 and 31 kilometers per hour. The voyage began smoothly as Estonia sailed into the Baltic Sea, a branch of the Atlantic Ocean covering 149,000 square miles. Though it wasn't as large as the Mediterranean or as oil-rich as the North Sea, the Baltic had always held strategic and commercial value. It had been a vital waterway since Roman times, through the Middle Ages, and into the modern era. But alongside trade routes and economic power, the Baltic also carries countless stories, many of them tragic. That night, After dinner was served, the ship's bar came alive with music and laughter. A dance troupe performed, entertaining a crowd of businessmen, tourists, and elites. Meanwhile, other groups of passengers headed to the upper decks to admire the sea under moonlight. But as midnight approached, the weather began to turn. By 11 p.m., the situation had started to deteriorate. Winds rose to Beaufort scale 7 to 10. Waves reached 6 meters in height. Some passengers joked nervously, "This is starting to feel like Titanic too." The ferry had already faced 48 hours of rough weather on this route before, so the captain, calm and composed, wasn't concerned. With his 15 years of experience, he remained confident in navigating through the storm. The ship continued forward, holding a steady speed of 26 to 28 kilometers per hour. But not all vessels shared that confidence. Several nearby ships decided to turn back to shore for safety. 0:52 a.m., some passengers returned to their cabins. Many had already fallen asleep, unaware of what was about to happen. At 0:58 a.m., the Estonia was now near the outskirts of Finland's territorial waters. Winds reached 100 kilometers per hour, and rain began to fall. Temperatures dropped to just 10 degrees Celsius. Large waves slammed repeatedly against the bow, but the crew saw no immediate cause for alarm. Then, at 1 a.m., passengers began hearing strange noises, metallic bangs echoing from the lower decks. Captain Andreessen immediately ordered crew members to inspect the vehicle deck near the bow, but nothing seemed abnormal at first. However, within just 10 minutes, multiple reports of similar banging and clanging came in from other areas. Then at 1:15 a.m., a loud, violent crash was heard. A 50-ton bow visor, the cover plate protecting the vehicle ramp, was believed to have torn off, and almost instantly, the car deck door burst open, allowing massive amounts of seawater to rush inside. The ship leaned violently to the starboard side at an angle of 15 degrees. To regain control, the captain turned the rudder to port and reduced speed to 16 kilometers per hour. At 1:20 a.m., a female voice echoed from the ship's PA system, accompanied by emergency alarms. The call went out, "Emergency, abandoned ship." Panic erupted. Passengers rushed out from their cabins and bars, pulling on jackets, grabbing loved ones, and racing toward the stairways. But not everyone was awake. Some were still asleep, unaware of the unfolding disaster. Seawater was no longer limited to the vehicle deck. It began flooding the cabins through windows and vents, especially near compartment 6, where large windows cracked under pressure. The increasing tilt of the ship, now dangerously steep, made it nearly impossible for passengers to climb up the stairwells. In the engine room, the captain and officers faced a life or death decision. They attempted a maneuver, reversing course, hoping the force of the waves and wind might help rebalance the ship. But it was too late. Water cascaded through ceiling panels, down stairwells, and into hallways. Staircases were jammed with bodies, everyone scrambling for the upper decks. One young man, named Magnus, guided his parents and girlfriend towards safety, but the ship's steep tilt made progress impossible. They got stuck halfway up. Magnus was the only one who managed to climb higher. He tried to go back and save them, but his family begged him to keep going, to survive. So he turned and ran, up the stairwell, as the floor beneath him tilted like a vertical slide. All around him, children, women, the elderly, and the injured, struggling, crying, unable to escape. People began doing whatever they could, just to save themselves. Some of the younger, stronger men were able to reach the upper decks first. They were given life jackets and told to wait. But water was rising too fast. Many jumped into the sea without hesitation. The icy water hit them like a wall. Their strength drained instantly. Everything was happening too fast. There was no time to follow protocol, no time to organize. A few lifeboats were launched, but many failed to deploy due to the ship's extreme tilt. At 1:21 a.m., all of the Estonia's engines shut down. The ship was now drifting powerlessly, moments away from being swallowed by the Baltic Sea. A minute later, the crew sent out a distress message, but it didn't follow international emergency formats. The captain then tried to contact another ferry nearby, the Silja Europa. Only after that radio connection was made did the Estonia's operators send out a proper emergency message. The radio operator on Silja Europa, Captain Joseph Burling, responded in English.
Estonia, Mariella.
Estonia replied and switched to Finnish, providing limited details about their condition. But because of the electrical failure, they couldn't give their exact location. This slowed down the initial rescue efforts. At that moment, 13 other vessels received the Mayday signal. The closest was the Mariella, just 14 kilometers away. They tried to re-establish radio contact with Estonia, but no reply came back. By now, all main power systems on board had failed. The Estonia was in complete blackout. A few minutes later, a backup generator kicked in, providing power to some essential systems. 1:30 a.m., the ship tilted over to a staggering 60-degree angle. With power fluctuating, the night crew scrambled to reach the GPS system, a device capable of transmitting coordinates, even under low power conditions. Thanks to this, Estonia was able to share its approximate position with Silja Europa and Mariella. Then at 1:30 a.m., the Estonia sent its final radio transmission. It's really bad. The situation is really bad. Just 1 minute later, 1:35 a.m., all crew members in the engine room drowned. By 1:50 a.m., the Estonia had rolled to a 90-degree angle, almost completely overturned. Shortly after, it disappeared from the radar screens of surrounding ships. Its final position was recorded as 5,923 N, 2141E in international waters, about 22 nautical miles off the coast of Finland's island. That's roughly 41 kilometers offshore, where the seabed depth ranges between 74 to 85 meters. At that moment, over 650 people were still trapped inside the ship. Only about 300 passengers made it out and jumped into the freezing Baltic waters, but many of them would not survive long enough for help to arrive. The Maritime Rescue Coordination Center, MRCC in Turku, Finland, was the first unit to receive the emergency alert, but they didn't treat it as a confirmed disaster at first. They only relayed it as a PAN alert, a message of urgency, but not distress. As a result, a full-scale rescue operation wasn't launched immediately. Not until 2:30 a.m. was a state of full emergency officially declared, but by then, precious time had already been lost. At 12 a.m., the Mariella became the first vessel to reach the disaster site. Lifeboats were lowered into the rough sea. 13 survivors from Estonia were pulled aboard. At 3:05 a.m., rescue helicopters from Sweden and Finland arrived, but it was already too late for many. Nearly 1/3 of those who had escaped into the sea died from hypothermia before the helicopters could reach them. One helicopter managed to save 44 people. Other rescue ships also saved additional survivors. Out of 989 people on board, only 138 were rescued. One of them died later in the hospital. The final death toll was 850 people. Most deaths were caused by drowning or severe hypothermia. Survivors were overwhelmingly young men in good physical condition. 0.111 male survivors. Only 26 women survived. Just 7 people over age 55 made it, and no children under 12 lived. An official investigation was launched by the Joint Accident Investigation Commission, JAIC, including Estonia, Sweden, and Finland. Their report, released in 1997, concluded the failure of the bow visor, the 50-ton cover plate at the front, was the main cause of the disaster. According to the investigation, the locks securing the visor were not strong enough to withstand the pounding force of the waves. When the visor detached, it pulled open the ramp door beneath it, allowing massive amounts of seawater to enter the car deck, destabilizing the vessel and causing it to sink rapidly. The report also criticized the crew's response. No immediate action was taken. There was a delay in raising the alarm, lack of clear leadership from the captain. Emergency flares were not deployed in time. Technically, the report was plausible, but for many victims' families, it wasn't enough. A hole in the hull. It had been 26 years since the accident. The public had mostly accepted the official explanation of the tragedy. But then, a Swedish documentary revealed something unexpected. They had discovered a large hole in the side of the wreck. This discovery led to speculation that the MS Estonia may have been struck by an external object. Using underwater robots, the team explored the wreck site, located 165 feet below sea level. In 2021, they filmed the hole from meters high and 1.2 meters deep. Some experts believe the damage may have occurred after the ship hit the rocky seabed. Even so, the existence of the hole sparked many different theories about what really happened. Some believe the Estonia was attacked by Russian ships, terrorists, or even drug traffickers. Back to the night of the disaster. At 1 a.m., passengers had heard a loud metallic crash. Crew members went to check the bow section, where there's a special door called the visor that allows entry into the vehicle deck, but they reported no abnormalities. Just 15 minutes later, the ship began to tilt and roll hard to the right. Some of the survivors later said they had heard a powerful explosion at the time of the accident. One passenger, Karl Erik Reintam, claimed he saw a large white object floating in the water nearby. A former Estonian official, Andres Anstrom, agreed. The hole in the hull was unusually large. He believed it could have been caused by a military ship or another massive object that struck the starboard side of the Estonia with a force up to 600 tons. The Swedish documentary shocked all 3 countries most impacted by the tragedy: Estonia, Finland, and Sweden. Public outrage spread quickly, and even government authorities in the involved countries agreed to reopen parts of the case. Along with the shocking new footage, the documentary proposed another dark theory, that the Estonia sank because it was secretly carrying military cargo. According to some reliable sources, the ferry had been used by the Swedish military to transport Russian military technology. This equipment allegedly left Tallinn just weeks before the Estonia sank. The film even named an intelligence agent, Richard Tomlinson, who confirmed to a journalist in 1998 that the ship could have been connected to a Russian ballistic missile program. At that time, the Soviet Union had already collapsed, and old weapons were being smuggled out of Estonia. To support the theory of Russian involvement, investigators pointed to a secret agreement signed in 1995, just a year after the disaster. The agreement involved Sweden, Finland, Estonia, Latvia, Poland, and Russia. It declared the Estonia wreck site to be a maritime grave and prohibited anyone from approaching it, even for investigation. As the public was still overwhelmed by the information from the Swedish filmmakers, another mystery caught their attention. It involved one man, Captain Avo Pitt. He was one of the 2 rotating captains of the MS Estonia, along with Captain Andresen. Although not on duty during that voyage, Captain Pitt was on board as a passenger, heading to Stockholm. According to initial reports, Pitt was rescued after the sinking. He was listed among the survivors, and some witnesses said they saw him helping others evacuate. His name was officially recorded as one of the survivors. But then, he vanished. He was never seen again. His sudden disappearance sparked countless conspiracy theories. Some believed that Captain Pitt had seen something too sensitive and was placed in a witness protection program. Others feared something darker, that he may have been eliminated to cover up the true cause of the tragedy. However, a comprehensive police investigation conducted in Estonia in the late 1990s completely rejected these theories. According to the Estonian newspaper ST Express, the records showed that Captain Pitt stayed on board in the final moments, helping with evacuation efforts at the rear of the ship. Multiple survivor testimonies confirmed he was present just before the ship sank. His body was never recovered. Investigators concluded he likely went down with the ship